Welcome to 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the fruit of the Spirit with Jake Williams.
In the book of Ephesians, Paul calls the church at Ephesus to become new humans that live and love like Jesus, promising that the Spirit will equip them to stand strong against divisive forces and spiritual evil. In chapter 4 of the book of Ephesians, Paul gives instructions for Christian households. He tells them how to love each other. He says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband." It really is true that the number one reason that relationships of all kinds go bad is neglect. Here is the structure of every relationship this side of eternity. It is a flawed person in relationship to a flawed person in a fallen world, but with a faithful God. Since it is a flawed person in a relationship to a flawed person, if you're in a relationship, you simply can't let the relationship coast and expect that everything will be fine. It's like planting a garden. You clear the land, you break up the soil, you plant, water, nurture, but at that point, you don't have the liberty of walking away. Your work hasn't ended. In fact, it's just beginning. Because you have planted your flowers in impure soil and in a less than perfect environment. Weeds will immediately begin to grow up, and if you don't attend to them, they will soon dominate the bed and choke the vitality of your beautiful flowers. And so it is with the relationship. Once a relationship is planted, weeds quickly begin to come up. Weeds of conflict, control, bitterness, unforgiveness, anger, selfishness, pride, greed, jealousy, impatience, unkindness, self-righteousness. All these things grow up and choke the life out of the relationship. Daily attention is needed because every person in a relationship brings something dangerous and destructive into the relationship, something that's antisocial at its core. And the Bible calls this sin. As long as sin lives in us, it has the power to wreak havoc in our relationships. So we can't neglect the daily nurture that they need. A good relationship is a good relationship because the people in that relationship never quit working on the relationship. Does this sound hard or dark to you? Does it make you want to run away from relationships? Well, you don't have to be afraid because if you're God's child, you bring something else into your relationship that should give you hope. Peter reminds married couples in 1 Peter 3:7 that they are joint heirs of the grace of life. There is hope for your relationship. There are resources for struggle because you have an inheritance that's big, powerful, rescuing, and transforming. It's called grace. This grace is so big and powerful that there's no way to wrap human words around it. This grace motivates and empowers the hard work that every relationship requires. In times of trouble, you move toward the other person, knowing the inheritance that you have been given for such a time as this. Day after day, knowing the grace you have been given, you rid your relationship of the weeds of selfishness and sin so that the flowers of peace and love can grow. And in the end, you don't celebrate how good you are at relationships. You celebrate the giver of grace. This grace daily rescues us from the bondage of ourselves and gives us the resources to be a person who truly can love others.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.